He sacrificed himself for an alien child and woke up to elite warriors at his side. Tyler Grant had always believed that the universe was a place where ordinary people like him got overlooked. He was just a maintenance worker on the Harmony, a diplomatic vessel that had become Earth's roaming embassy in the stars. His role aboard the ship was simple: sweeping floors, scrubbing toilets, and fixing minor equipment issues. To the crew and diplomats aboard the Harmony, he was invisible, a nobody, and that suited Tyler just fine. But that morning, something in the air felt different. It wasn't the usual hum of the ship's engines, nor the steady routine of another day at work. No, there was an unease creeping into the corners of Tyler's mind that wouldn't shake off. The feeling had started when he got out of bed, his bare feet hitting the cold metal floor as he reached for his uniform. But even then, his instincts were telling him that this day wouldn't go according to plan. The Harmony had docked at Nexus Station, a sprawling intergalactic hub where different species came together to trade and talk. Tyler had passed through the station before, always in the background, unnoticed as usual. But today, the marketplace below the station felt like a ticking clock, counting down to something he couldn't yet understand. With a sigh, he shoved the uniform on and glanced at the small digital frame beside his bed, where a rotating set of family photos greeted him. His parents back on Earth, standing in front of their small farm, his sister on her graduation day, and the one photo of him in his military uniform from years ago, right before his dreams of joining the Earth Defense Force were crushed. A minor heart issue had kept him from enlisting, but the sting of rejection still lingered in his chest. That was his fate, it seemed. Overlooked, forgotten, and stuck in a job that barely made him feel alive. "Morning," he muttered to a few passing crew members in the hallway. He was invisible, and that was just the way he liked it. But then, just before he walked into the mess hall, a familiar voice called out to him. "Tyler." Dr. Sarah Morgan, the ship's xenobiologist, flashed him a smile as she approached. Unlike most of the crew, she took the time to actually acknowledge him. He smiled back, grateful for the brief moment of human connection. "Early start again?" Sarah asked, her voice light. Tyler shrugged, feeling the weight of his usual routine. "Same as always. Someone's got to keep this place from looking like a storage closet." Sarah laughed. "Some of the diplomats could use a good scrub down. The Centurion delegation leaves more scales in the conference room than my cat leaves fur on my couch." "Yeah, I bet," Tyler said with a grin. He'd already mentally prepared himself for the special vacuum attachment he'd need later that day. "Anything interesting on your plate today?" Sarah's eyes lit up. "Actually, yes. We're heading down to Nexus Station's marketplace. There's a Valerian botanist who's crossbred Terran orchids with Proximan fire lilies. I've got to see it to believe it." "Sounds exciting," Tyler said, even though he didn't quite get the science behind it. "Be careful down there, though. I heard talk of some tensions between the Draxians and Nelvari, something about a trade dispute." "Always the worrywart," Sarah teased, but her smile faded slightly. "I'll be fine, it's just a marketplace. What could happen?" "Right, just a marketplace," Tyler said, his mind drifting to something he couldn't quite shake off. The nagging feeling in his gut didn't feel like just an overactive imagination. Something was off, and he couldn't pinpoint why. After finishing his morning chores, Tyler had a few hours to kill. He checked his work schedule and decided to head to the marketplace. It wasn't because of the commander's warning. It was just that he had to pick up a cleaning solvent for the Arkshiran ambassador's quarters. At least that's what he told himself. A small break from the dull, monotonous routine wouldn't hurt. Nexus Station was a sensory overload. The marketplace was the station's heart, a buzzing hive of activity where aliens of every shape and size came together to trade, bargain, and chat. Tyler weaved through the throngs of species, the smells of alien foods and strange perfumes filling the air. Voices speaking in 100 different languages swirled around him, creating a chaotic symphony of sound. Tyler didn't mind the chaos. He'd grown used to it. But today, something felt more intense, more charged, as if the whole station was holding its breath. He finally made it to the maintenance supply shop tucked away in a quieter corner of the marketplace. After making his purchase, Tyler turned to leave. That's when he heard it, raised voices, angry ones. His curiosity piqued, he followed the sound toward the source. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. A small crowd had gathered around a heated argument between a Draxian merchant and a station security officer. The Draxian's scales were dark crimson, a sign of agitation. His teeth were bared, his body tense. The officer's hand hovered near his stun gun, his patience clearly wearing thin. "This is the third time this week," the officer was saying, trying to remain calm. "You can't block the walkway with your cart." "Other vendors do the same," the Draxian hissed, showing his razor-sharp teeth. The officer sighed, clearly exhausted. "Just move the cart back to the designated area, now." The Draxian begrudgingly moved his cart, muttering something in his native tongue. But the tension wasn't over. Tyler noticed a small group of Draxians standing nearby, watching the scene with quiet intensity. They exchanged hushed words, their eyes shifting between the merchant and the officer. Tyler's stomach tightened. He couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was going on here, something that wasn't being said. It wasn't just about a cart blocking the walkway. Tyler continued his way back toward the transport tube, but a soft tug at his side caught his attention. He turned to find a small Nelvari child, no older than 8 or 9, with pale blue fur and wide, terrified amber eyes dashed into him. She was alone. "Hey, little one," Tyler said softly, kneeling down to her level. "What's the hurry?" The child babbled in her language, and Tyler's translator struggled to keep up. He caught a few words: mother, lost, scared. Tyler's heart went out to her. She looked terrified. "Are you lost? Are you looking for your mother?" he asked gently. The child nodded vigorously. Tyler stood up, looking around the crowded market. He couldn't see any sign of the child's parent. This wasn't right. Something was wrong here, and it wasn't just about a missing child. As he took the small hand of the Nelvari girl, a sudden, sharp sound sliced through the air, a scream of fear from the crowd. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and his instincts screamed at him to move. Tyler didn't know it yet, but the marketplace was about to become the epicenter of a battle that would change everything. And Tyler Grant, just a janitor, a man who'd always been invisible, was about to find himself at the center of a war he never saw coming. The unexpected encounter. Tyler Grant had always thought of himself as just another cog in the machine, unseen, unimportant. He never expected his actions to matter, especially not in a world so full of alien species and galactic politics. Yet, here he was, walking through the crowded Nexus Station marketplace, guiding a frightened Nelvari child through a sea of unknown faces and voices. This wasn't the life he had imagined. The marketplace buzzed with energy. Alien merchants shouted at each other in dozens of languages, the air thick with the scents of strange foods, exotic spices, and the faint hum of technology. Tyler could barely hear his own thoughts over the noise. It was a constant reminder of how small he felt in this universe, a speck in a galaxy full of far more important beings. But the little hand clutching his, warm and trembling, brought him back to reality. The Nelvari child, whose name he had learned was Mira, had been separated from her mother in the chaos. Her fur, a soft shade of pale blue, seemed to ripple with every fearful glance she cast over her shoulder. Her large amber eyes were wide, searching frantically for someone, anyone, familiar. Tyler had seen his share of fear on Earth. He had seen it in the eyes of soldiers leaving for war, in the panic of people caught in disasters. But seeing it in the eyes of this small alien child, a creature so different from anything he'd ever known, made it all the more real. He could feel her fear in his bones. "Don't worry, Mira," Tyler said softly, his voice calm despite the tightening in his chest. "We'll find your mom. You're not alone." Mira looked up at him, her eyes still filled with uncertainty but a flicker of trust starting to shine through. She nodded silently, but her grip on his hand tightened. Tyler scanned the marketplace for any sign of a distressed adult Nelvari. He had no idea what her mother looked like, but he knew they had to find her soon. The crowd was thickening, and the air seemed heavier with every step they took. The feeling of unease Tyler had felt earlier was creeping back. Something about this place, this moment, didn't feel right. As they passed a row of stalls, Tyler spotted a jewelry vendor, a Nelvari woman, likely in her 40s, arranging delicate silver pieces in front of her stall. She glanced up as Tyler and Mira approached, her expression softening when she saw the child. "Excuse me," Tyler said, his voice polite but urgent. "This child is looking for her mother, a Nelvari named Tila. Have you seen her?" The woman's face tightened slightly with concern, and she stood a little straighter. "Yes, they were here about half an hour ago. The mother seemed worried about something and left in a hurry. I think she was heading toward the security office." Tyler's heart sank. "The security office," he repeated, a knot forming in his stomach. If Mira's mother was already worried, the situation was more serious than it seemed. The jewelry vendor nodded, pointing toward a side corridor that led deeper into the marketplace. "That way," she said. "There's been some commotion today. She may have gone there." Tyler didn't hesitate. "Thanks," he said quickly, taking Mira's hand again. They pushed through the crowd, moving down the corridor the vendor had pointed out. The further they went, the quieter it became. The shops here were smaller, more specialized, selling everything from rare plants to ancient relics. The hustle of the main marketplace was a distant hum behind them. It was here, in the narrow corridor, that Tyler noticed the first signs that something was terribly wrong. A group of Draxians, tall, hulking figures with reptilian features, stood together, their eyes scanning the crowd in a way that didn't seem quite right. Tyler's instincts screamed that they weren't just here for trade. The Draxians were a proud species, known for their strength and their ferocity, but this group was different. They seemed tense, and their eyes never stopped moving, always watching, always calculating. Tyler's mind flashed back to the warnings he'd overheard from Commander Blake. Tensions were high between the Draxians and the Nelvari. There had been rumors of extremists, Draxians unhappy with the new trade agreements, the growing influence of humanity, and the Nelvari Confederation. Tyler hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now, with the Draxians in plain view and the child clinging to him, it all seemed too real. Before he could think more on it, Mira tugged on his hand again. "My mother," she whispered, her voice shaking. "She's there." Tyler looked up. Ahead of them, just outside a small security substation, a Nelvari woman was standing, arguing with a station security officer. It was Mira's mother, Tila. She seemed frantic, her fur standing on end, her voice raised in frustration as she pleaded with the officer. "Stay here," Tyler said quietly to Mira, crouching down to her level. "I'll make sure she's okay." Mira nodded, though her eyes were filled with worry. Tyler squeezed her hand gently before making his way toward Tila. "Excuse me," Tyler said, approaching cautiously. Tila looked up at him, and in her amber eyes, Tyler saw the same fear that had been in Mira's. "You," she started, then her eyes flicked to Mira, who had appeared behind him, safe and sound. "Oh, thank the ancestors." Tila rushed toward her daughter, sweeping her up into a tight embrace. "Where have you been?" she whispered, holding Mira close. "I was so scared." "I found her," Tyler said, a sense of relief washing over him. "She was lost, but we're good. You don't need to worry now." Tila nodded, wiping away a tear. "You saved her," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know how to thank you." Tyler offered a small smile. "No need for thanks. I'm just glad she's safe." But before he could turn to leave, the security officer spoke up again, his voice low and serious. "You should get somewhere safe," he warned. "There's been a lot of chatter about Draxian extremists today. Things are escalating." Tyler turned to look back at the corridor, where the group of Draxians had not moved. The officer was right. It was clear now that the tension was more than just political disagreements. It was something more dangerous, something Tyler hadn't expected to find today. "Go," the officer urged. "I'll stay here and keep an eye on things. It's not safe to be wandering around." Tila looked at Tyler, her face filled with gratitude but also fear. "We'll head to the ship," she said quickly. "Thank you again." Just as they started to move, a sudden commotion echoed from the plaza. Shouts, screams, and the unmistakable sound of energy weapons discharging. The marketplace had erupted into chaos. Tyler froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew exactly what was happening now. Those Draxian extremists weren't just talking. They were attacking. And he, just a janitor, had been caught in the middle of something far bigger than he ever imagined. The war that had started as a simple political dispute was about to become something deadly, and Tyler Grant was about to find himself in the heart of it. He didn't know it yet, but his choice to help Mira was going to set off a chain of events that would change everything. For better or worse, he was no longer invisible, and the fight for survival was about to begin. The battle begins. Tyler's heart was pounding, his breath shallow, as the chaos of Nexus Station exploded around him. It wasn't just the sounds of shouting or the shrill cries of alarm that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. No, it was the sudden shift in the air, a heavy, unnatural tension that hung in the space between every breath. The marketplace, once a buzzing hub of commerce and life, had quickly turned into a battleground. "Stay close, Mira," Tyler said, his voice barely a whisper, though his words carried the weight of his fear. The child had clung to his side, her wide amber eyes darting nervously between the faces in the crowd. Her hand, still tightly gripping his, was warm and trembling, a mirror to his own nerves. They had been walking in the quiet corridor just moments ago, and now the station felt like it was coming apart at the seams. Tila, Mira's mother, had grabbed her daughter and hurried to the security office as instructed, but the sense of danger Tyler had felt earlier still gripped him. He couldn't ignore the sharp, unsettling sound of energy weapons discharging in the distance, nor the deep, guttural growl of something more menacing that was rising from the shadows. A voice shouted from behind them, one Tyler recognized as belonging to a Draxian. He spun around just in time to see a figure step into view. It was one of the extremists, his scales gleaming crimson in the dim light, his eyes filled with a fury that Tyler had only ever seen in animals defending their territory. "Move aside, human," the Draxian sneered. His voice was like gravel grinding together, low and dangerous. Tyler's muscles tensed. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he had a feeling it wouldn't be good. The Draxian wasn't alone. From around the corner emerged two more, each one armed with jagged ceremonial blades that glinted ominously under the market lights. Tyler knew he was unarmed, a janitor with no more combat experience than what he'd managed to pick up from basic military training that had never been put to the test. He was used to scrubbing floors, not standing between armed attackers and innocent people. But there was something primal in him now, something that would not allow him to simply step aside. Not when a child's life was at stake. "Get inside," Tyler shouted to Tila, his voice cutting through the chaos. But Tila hesitated, her fur bristling with fear. The security office door was still locked, and with the chaos unfolding around them, Tyler knew they couldn't afford to waste any more time. "Move now," Tyler barked, his tone sharp with urgency. Tila, shaken but determined, nodded. She grabbed Mira and made a run for the door. But before they could reach it, the Draxians had moved, their eyes now locked on the fleeing Nelvari family. Tyler couldn't let them get any closer. He had no idea how much time he had, but he wasn't about to let these attackers turn the market into a slaughterhouse. In one swift motion, Tyler stepped in front of Tila and Mira, his body acting on instinct. His heart was thumping so loudly he could barely hear the shouts around him. His breath hitched, but his feet stayed planted. "Stop," he shouted, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. The Draxian leader, one who had a jagged scar running across his crest, paused. His eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a snarl as he regarded Tyler with disdain. "You think you can stop us, human," the leader growled. "This is not your fight. Stand aside and maybe we let you live." Tyler's grip tightened. His mind raced, but his body was already moving before he had a chance to second-guess himself. "You'll have to go through me first," he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The leader let out a low hiss, his eyes flashing with deadly intent. Without warning, he lunged, his blade aimed directly at Tyler's chest. It was too fast. Tyler's instincts kicked in just in time, sidestepping the strike, but the momentum of the Draxian's attack sent the blade grazing his side. Pain flared in his ribcage, but Tyler didn't let it stop him. He felt it, but the fear for the child and her mother was greater. As the Draxian leader staggered from the missed strike, Tyler's hand shot out and grabbed the attacker's wrist, using the Draxian's own momentum to throw him off balance. The move was clumsy, but effective enough to make the Draxian stumble backward, his blade skidding across the metal floor. The second Draxian, not waiting for his leader's command, swung his blade toward Tyler's side. The blow caught Tyler off guard, cutting across his shoulder with a searing pain. He gritted his teeth and fought through the shock of the wound, his hand reaching instinctively for anything to defend himself. He found it, a broken shard of the first Draxian's discarded blade. Gripping it tightly, Tyler lunged forward, using the momentum of the attack to thrust the blade into the second Draxian's stomach. The creature howled, stumbling back, clearly caught off guard by the human's desperate but powerful strike. For a moment, Tyler's mind whirled with disbelief. He never imagined himself in a situation like this, fighting for his life, his body bleeding from the wounds inflicted by these alien attackers. But he didn't have time to think. He needed to keep moving. The third Draxian, now circling him, found his opening. He lunged, aiming for Tyler's throat, but Tyler was ready this time. With a burst of energy, he ducked under the attack and swung the broken blade upward, catching the Draxian off guard. The blade scraped across his shoulder, and the attacker reeled back, hissing in pain. But Tyler wasn't finished. The pain in his side was almost unbearable, his vision narrowing at the edges. He had no idea how much longer he could keep fighting. His body was tired, his wounds growing more severe with every passing moment. But there was no choice now. He couldn't back down, not while Mira and her mother were in danger. The Draxian leader, now recovering from the stumble, turned his gaze to the human. A growl rumbled in his throat. "You should have stayed out of this, human. You'll pay for your insolence." Tyler stood tall, bleeding and breathless. But he wasn't going anywhere, not without making sure the Nelvari family was safe. "You'll have to do more than threaten me to get to them," Tyler said, barely able to keep his voice steady. "If you want to get past me, you'll have to kill me first." The leader paused, eyeing Tyler's determined stance. The tension in the air was thick, but before he could make his next move, the unmistakable sound of station security rushing in filled the corridor. Reinforcements were here. The Draxians hesitated, looking toward the door as more security officers poured into the hallway. Tyler's heart sank in relief. Help had arrived, but the fight wasn't over yet. The Draxians were retreating, but not before the leader made one last desperate lunge toward Mira. Without thinking, Tyler stepped forward, putting himself between the leader and the child. The Draxian's blade found its mark deep in his back. Tyler's legs buckled beneath him as the pain surged through him, but his eyes never left Mira. She was safe, and that was all that mattered. As the world around him faded, Tyler's last thought was a simple one. He hadn't just been a janitor anymore. He was something more, a protector. And as he collapsed to the floor, his last breath carried with it a silent promise that he had done the right thing. The cost of courage. The world around Tyler Grant spun in a haze of pain, the edges of his vision darkening. The weight of the Draxian's blade had driven deep into his back, and as he collapsed onto the cold metal floor of the corridor, he felt the warmth of his blood spreading quickly beneath him. His breath came in ragged gasps, each one a struggle as his body screamed in protest. His heart pounded, but every beat felt like it was taking him farther from consciousness. His last conscious thought wasn't about the battle, nor the pain that gnawed at his body. It was about the child, Mira. She was safe. That was all that mattered. He had done his job. She was safe. But as the darkness crept in, Tyler could feel the weight of everything shift. The sharp, sterile smell of the station faded away, replaced by something softer, a faint humming sound like distant voices. Were they calling him, or was it just the fadding rhythm of his pulse? He couldn't tell anymore. When Tyler next opened his eyes, everything was different. The cold, hard floor of the corridor was gone. The pain in his body was still there, but it was dulled, muted. Instead of the chaos of the marketplace, he was surrounded by unfamiliar sounds and soft lights. The room he was in was quiet, almost peaceful. A soft beeping sound echoed from somewhere nearby, a constant reminder that he was alive, even though everything in him wanted to drift back into the blackness. For a long moment, Tyler lay still, trying to gather the energy to move. His head felt heavy, his limbs stiff. Every muscle screamed in protest, as though it was protesting the very act of staying alive. "Please remain still, Tyler Grant," a voice spoke gently, pulling him from his groggy thoughts. It was soft and melodic, different from anything he'd ever heard before. Tyler's eyelids fluttered, struggling to focus, and he turned his head slightly. A Nelvari woman stood beside him, her delicate features framed by flowing silver hair. She wore medical attire, her hands holding a device that Tyler couldn't quite make out. Her amber eyes were filled with concern, though she had the calm, practiced demeanor of someone who had seen suffering many times before. Where am I?" Tyler's voice was rough, strained. He tried to sit up, but his body refused to cooperate. Pain flared in his chest as his muscles protested, and he groaned in discomfort. "You are in the Royal Medical Center on Nell Prime," she said, her voice soothing yet firm. "You were transferred here after being stabilized on Nexus Station. Your injuries were extensive, but we have been treating them." Nell Prime. The name seemed to settle over him like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just any medical facility. It was the heart of the Nelvari Empire. 7 days, the medic continued, her voice steady. "You've been in an induced coma to help your body heal." Tyler's mind tried to process the information, but it felt like everything was happening too fast. 7 days? Had he really been unconscious for that long? That seemed impossible. He had been fighting in the marketplace, trying to protect Mira, and now he was on an entirely different world, far from where he had started. "The Nelvari royal family is aware of your condition," the medic added softly, as if reading his thoughts. "Your actions have been noted. You are not forgotten here." Tyler blinked slowly. He had no idea what that meant, but the word royal echoed in his head, making him feel a sense of unease. Royal? What did the Nelvari royalty want with someone like him? He was just a janitor, just a guy trying to do the right thing. His body ached with every shift, but he forced himself to sit up, ignoring the sharp pangs in his chest. The room was strange, sleek, with smooth surfaces and soft, iridescent light panels. It looked nothing like the Harmony's medical bay. The ceiling above him seemed to shimmer, glowing in a way that made everything feel otherworldly. "Please don't try to move too much," the medic advised, her hands gently pushing him back down. "Your wounds are still healing. It will take time." "Mira, her mother," Tyler whispered, his mind struggling to focus on what had truly mattered. "Are they safe?" The medic nodded, her expression softening with a trace of warmth. "They are unharmed, thanks to your bravery. The station's security has ensured their safety." Tyler let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Mira and her mother were okay. The panic that had been clouding his thoughts started to lift, replaced by a quiet relief. He had done what he needed to do. They were safe, and that was enough. But as his heart rate slowed, another thought crept in. Why am I here? The medic's calm demeanor shifted slightly, as if she had read the question in his eyes. "Your ship has been notified of your location. The Harmony's captain and crew are aware of your condition. They are grateful for your actions." Tyler's thoughts were foggy, the world still spinning slightly as his mind struggled to catch up with everything. "Captain," he murmured, too tired to fully process what that meant. I'm not important. I'm just a janitor." The medic's gaze softened as she leaned in closer. "What you did was not the action of a janitor, Tyler Grant. You did what many would not, what many could not. You protected an innocent, and in doing so, you demonstrated the qualities that the Nelvari hold in the highest regard." Tyler didn't know what to say. Not a janitor. He felt like one. He had always felt like one, someone overlooked, someone stuck in a job that wasn't nearly as important as the grand ambitions he once had. A janitor wasn't supposed to be a hero. Heroes were the soldiers, the diplomats, the leaders. He was just the guy cleaning up the mess. But something about the medic's words stuck with him, like a quiet seed that planted itself deep in his mind. She wasn't wrong, was she? The fight with the Draxians had been brutal, but his choice to step between them and Mira had been something more than he had ever expected of himself. It had been instinct, yes, but there was something about it, something that made him feel different. Before Tyler could dwell on his thoughts any longer, the door to his room slid open. The figure that entered was tall and regal, his movements calm and controlled. He had the unmistakable bearing of royalty. His fur was dark silver, streaked with a faint shimmer, and he wore an ornate uniform that spoke of authority. The king of the Nelvari, no doubt. Tyler's heart skipped a beat. What was the king doing here? Was he here to thank him? Or had he come for some other reason? Tyler Grant, the king's voice was deep and smooth, a quiet force in the stillness of the room. It is good to see you awake. I am King Ellerin of the Nelvari Confederation. I understand we owe you a great debt. Tyler blinked, his mind still foggy from the coma. Your Majesty, He stopped, unsure of what to say. His instincts told him to bow or show respect, but his body was too weak for that.
No need for formalities, the king said, his voice reassuring yet firm. We are aware of your actions on Nexus Station. What you did was beyond noble. You protected a member of my family, and for that, you have our eternal gratitude. Tyler's mind raced as he tried to process the words. Member of the royal family, he had only been trying to help a child. He hadn't known who she was, but to hear it now, it felt surreal. He hadn't done anything extraordinary. At least that's how he felt. Yet here he was in a royal medical facility, surrounded by people who saw him as something more than a janitor, something more than he ever thought he could be. The king's gaze softened, and his next words were almost gentle. When you are recovered, there will be a formal recognition of your service. You will be honored. Tyler's mind was still reeling. Recognition, honors. It didn't seem real. But as he lay back in the soft medical bed, his body still aching, one thing became clear. His life was about to change in ways he never imagined. A new path. Tyler Grant had never been one for grand gestures, and he certainly hadn't expected to be part of one. When he had stepped between the Draxian extremists and Mira, it had been nothing more than instinct, a desperate act of survival, an attempt to do what was right. Now, as he lay in a luxurious chamber on Nell Prime, his body still recovering from the brutal wounds he'd sustained, Tyler found himself facing an entirely new reality. The Harmony's crew had sent word. Tyler had been out of it for days, but his actions in the marketplace had reverberated across galaxies. Somehow, the simple, overlooked janitor had become a symbol of courage and sacrifice that extended far beyond the bounds of a single space station. News of his actions had spread quickly, and now he was caught in a whirlwind he hadn't signed up for. Tyler shifted in the bed, testing the limits of his mobility. The Nelvari medical technology had worked wonders, healing him faster than any human hospital ever could, but his muscles still ached from the battle, and the scars on his back were reminders of how close he had come to losing everything. Yet, despite the pain, a strange feeling lingered, something between fear and excitement, like standing on the edge of an unknown path. He wasn't the same person anymore. The door to his room slid open, breaking his reverie. A tall figure entered, his presence commanding. It was Roland, Mira's father, dressed in formal attire that spoke of his position in the Nelvari court. He was an imposing figure, but his eyes softened when they met Tyler. Tyler Grant, Roland said, his deep voice calm but with an edge of respect. How are you feeling? Better than I should, Tyler replied with a strained smile. He sat up a little more in the bed, trying to hide the discomfort the movement caused. Not exactly the way I pictured being treated after a near-death experience, but it's hard to complain. Roland nodded, a knowing glint in his eyes. You've earned more than just medical attention, Tyler. You've earned something much greater than that. Tyler raised an eyebrow. And what's that? Roland's expression shifted and he took a step closer. You have earned our respect, the respect of my family, of the Nelvari people. For a moment, Tyler felt a weight settle on him. Respect. He was still just a janitor in his mind, a janitor who had ended up on the front lines of a conflict he didn't even understand. He hadn't been thinking about respect or honor when he stepped in to protect Mira. He had been thinking about doing the right thing, nothing more. I'm not sure I understand, Tyler admitted, his voice low. I was just doing what needed to be done. Roland studied him for a long moment. That's the point. You did what needed to be done without hesitation, without concern for yourself. The Nelvari value courage, but more than that, we value selflessness, the ability to place others before yourself, even when it costs you everything. Tyler felt a knot tighten in his stomach. I wasn't trying to be a hero, Roland. I was just trying to make sure a kid wasn't in danger. I didn't know she was. He cut himself off, realizing he was about to say something that would only make his actions sound more accidental. Royal, Roland finished the sentence for him, his voice gentle but firm. You didn't know, but it didn't matter. You saw a child in danger and you acted. That is what defines a hero. Tyler shook his head, still struggling with the weight of Roland's words. He wasn't a hero. He had been a janitor, someone who had been overlooked and pushed aside his entire life. He had no training, no experience in battle. He wasn't built for heroism. Yet here he was, lying in a royal palace on Nell Prime, with the weight of a planet's gratitude resting on his shoulders. You've been offered a position, Roland continued, his tone careful but resolute. A special role within the Nelvari court, one that will allow you to continue your work with us and with Earth, a role that could change everything for you. Tyler blinked, trying to process the words. A position. He struggled to sit up fully now, his mind spinning. I don't understand. I'm a janitor. I fix toilets. I'm not exactly cut out for whatever this is you're offering. Roland's eyes softened, but there was still that intense respect in his gaze. You don't see it, do you? You've already done what many diplomats and politicians have failed to do. You have bridged the gap between two species without ever trying. You've already united us in ways words never could. Tyler felt his chest tighten. But I don't know anything about diplomacy, about interspecies politics. I don't even understand most of what's going on right now. All I know is that I made a choice to protect someone who couldn't protect themselves. And that's exactly why you've been chosen, Roland said, stepping closer. Not because you have experience, but because you have something far more valuable. You have authenticity. The Nelvari are tired of the endless negotiations and manipulations. They want real connections. They want honesty. And you, Tyler Grant, are the embodiment of that. Tyler felt his breath catch in his throat. You want me to be a diplomat? He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. I'm not qualified for that. I've never even been on a real mission. I've cleaned floors for 3 years. That's my job. You've already completed the hardest mission any diplomat could face, Roland replied, his voice steady. You have gained the trust of the Nelvari people, the trust of my family. You've protected our own. There's no higher qualification than that. Tyler stared at him, the weight of those words settling on him like a heavy mantle. A diplomat. He had never imagined himself in any role other than the one he had fallen into. And yet, here he was, being offered a chance to be part of something far bigger than himself. I don't know if I can do this, Tyler said quietly, the doubt creeping back into his voice. Roland smiled, a genuine warmth in his expression. You already have, Tyler. You've already done it. All that remains is for you to decide what comes next. Tyler sat in silence for a long while, the words hanging in the air between them. The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing in as he tried to make sense of everything that had happened to him. He had never asked for any of this, never imagined that a single decision could spiral into something so enormous. He was still the same guy he had been before, just a janitor, just a man trying to get by. But deep down, Tyler knew something had changed. Maybe it had changed the moment he stepped in front of Mira and her mother. Maybe it had changed the moment he had realized he wasn't willing to let someone else get hurt just because they were different. And now, standing on the precipice of something far beyond his comprehension, Tyler realized that it wasn't about being qualified. It was about the choices he had made when everything else had fallen apart. Perhaps the universe wasn't done with him yet. "All right," Tyler said, his voice quiet but firm. "I'll do it." Roland's expression softened into a smile. "Good. Then, Tyler Grant, welcome to a new path." And with that, Tyler stepped into a future he hadn't expected, a future that would redefine not only his life, but the future of two worlds. The weight of the choice. Tyler Grant had never been one for speeches or grand declarations. He was a man of action, or at least he thought he was. He had never imagined his life would take such an unexpected turn. The universe had a way of doing that, didn't it? Pulling you in a direction you never asked for, dragging you out of your comfortable, predictable life, and tossing you into something far larger than you could ever have prepared for. But as Tyler sat in a lavish room on Nell Prime, staring at the diplomatic papers spread out in front of him, it was hard to deny that his life was about to change forever. The once ordinary janitor was now a chosen representative, a special envoy, an ambassador of sorts between Earth and the Nelvari Confederation. It felt surreal. Was this even real? The room was dimly lit, the soft glow of alien lights casting long shadows across the polished floor. The walls around him were adorned with intricate designs of Nelvari history and culture, every inch of the space steeped in regal elegance. Tyler had never been inside a room like this before. Even the Harmony, with its sleek, utilitarian design, had nothing like this. A soft knock on the door broke through his reverie. "Come in," Tyler said, his voice barely above a murmur, still not used to his new role. The door slid open, and in walked Roland, Mira's father, who had been a constant presence since Tyler had arrived on Nell Prime. He was dressed more casually this time, but there was no mistaking the air of authority around him. "Tyler," Roland greeted, his voice warm but measured. "How are you feeling?" "Still adjusting," Tyler said with a half-smile, rubbing his face as if trying to wake up from a strange dream. "This whole thing, it's a lot to take in." Roland nodded, stepping into the room and taking a seat across from Tyler. "I understand. It's not every day a simple maintenance worker is asked to represent two worlds." Tyler looked down at the diplomatic documents before him, his mind racing. The papers weren't just forms, they were promises, agreements, his future written out in legalese and protocol. He wasn't just going to be a bridge between Earth and Nelvari anymore. He was going to be part of the diplomatic machinery, something he never imagined he would be. "I didn't ask for this," Tyler said quietly, his fingers tracing the edge of one of the papers. "I didn't even know what I was getting into, but now." "Now you've become something else," Roland finished, his gaze steady. "Something important." Tyler shook his head, the weight of the words sinking into him. "I just acted. I wasn't thinking about politics or alliances or any of that. I saw a child in danger. That's all I saw." Roland's expression softened and he leaned forward slightly. "And that is why you've been chosen. It's not about experience or strategy. It's about what you did in that moment without hesitation. You acted out of instinct, out of humanity. That's the kind of leadership we need." Tyler's mind still couldn't wrap itself around the idea of leadership. He wasn't a leader. He was just a guy trying to get by. "I don't know if I can do this, Roland," Tyler confessed, his voice low. "I don't know if I'm cut out for this kind of responsibility. I'm a janitor. I fix things. I don't negotiate peace treaties or mediate interspecies relations." Roland's eyes remained calm, patient as he listened. "But you've already done more than most diplomats ever will. You've seen the true cost of violence, the price of protecting others. You understand what it means to make a choice, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. That is the foundation of any great leader." Tyler swallowed hard, feeling the enormity of Roland's words. A great leader. The thought felt ridiculous to him. He had never imagined himself as anything but a simple worker, someone whose existence was barely noticed by the world. Now, in the quiet grandeur of the Nelvari Palace, he was being offered a chance to shape the future. But did he deserve it? "What happens now?" Tyler asked, his voice hoarse with uncertainty. Roland leaned back in his chair, looking out the window where the twin moons of Nell Prime hung in the sky, their light spilling over the city. "Now we wait. Earth and Nelvari are at a crossroads. There is much to be decided, much to be negotiated. But your role will be key. You're not just an envoy between our worlds, you're a symbol of something new. You have the potential to change everything." Tyler stared at him, trying to digest what that meant. A symbol. What kind of symbol could a janitor, someone who had barely managed to hold his life together, become? "Tyler," Roland continued, his voice firm, "this is bigger than you or me. The stakes are high and there are forces that will try to keep us apart. But you've already shown that when faced with a choice, you'll do what's right no matter the cost. That's why you were chosen." The weight of the conversation hung heavily in the air, and Tyler felt his chest tighten. He had never felt this kind of pressure before. Sure, he'd been responsible for his own life, but this was on another level entirely. He wasn't just being asked to clean up the mess anymore. He was being asked to prevent future messes, to lead, to be something he had never thought he could be. His fingers brushed the papers again, and his gaze drifted to the seal of the Nelvari Confederation stamped at the top. The honor, the trust, the hope that was being placed in him, it was almost too much to bear. But as he stared at the royal seal, something inside of him stirred, a flicker of resolve. "Maybe I can do this." "I'll do it," Tyler said, his voice steady now, the uncertainty slowly slipping away. "I'll take the position." Roland's expression softened into a smile, one filled with pride and understanding. "I knew you would," he said quietly. "You've already made the choice. Now let's see where it leads." The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges Tyler couldn't yet understand. But for the first time since he had stepped onto the Harmony, he felt something shifting within him. The weight of his new role still felt heavy, but it was a weight he was beginning to accept. This was no longer about being invisible, no longer about just surviving. This was his moment, his chance to make a difference. Tyler Grant had made a choice, to step up, to act when others hesitated. And now he would walk a new path, a path that might change the course of history itself. As the soft hum of the palace echoed through the room, Tyler looked out at the stars, the vast unknown stretching out before him. He wasn't sure where this journey would lead, but for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to take the next step. He had a new purpose now, and that purpose was bigger than anything he had ever dreamed. The dawn of a new era. Tyler Grant had never imagined that the weight of the universe could rest so heavily on his shoulders. The once-forgotten janitor, whose life had been a blur of routine and quiet frustration, now stood on the cusp of something monumental. The walls of his quarters in the Nelvari Palace felt strangely small around him as he dressed in the formal attire of a special envoy, an identity that still seemed foreign to him, a costume he didn't feel quite ready to wear. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing the man who stared back. His injuries had healed rapidly, but the mental and emotional scars remained. Every time he moved, the reminder of the blades that had pierced his body lingered. Yet in his chest, a deeper change had taken root. The fear and uncertainty that once defined him were now joined by something else, something he couldn't quite name yet, but that felt as essential as air. He was a symbol now, but more than that, he was a link between two worlds, two species that were on the brink of a new future, a future he had helped to forge without ever asking for it. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts, and Tyler's heart skipped a beat. He had been avoiding the conversations he knew were coming, the ones that would thrust him further into the world of politics, diplomacy, and interspecies relations. but there was no turning back now. "Come in," Tyler called, straightening his tunic and forcing himself to take a deep breath. The door slid open, and Roland stepped inside, his regal presence unmistakable. But today, there was something else in his eyes, a warmth that spoke of quiet pride, a father's pride in seeing his daughter's protector rise to something greater than anyone could have imagined. "Are you ready?" Roland asked, his voice steady but with an edge of something softer beneath it. Tyler met his gaze in the mirror before turning fully to face him. "I'm still trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be ready for," he replied, his voice tinged with a humor that was both nervous and genuine. Roland's eyes twinkled with understanding. "You're ready for what comes next. The rest will follow in time." Tyler nodded slowly, though a part of him still wasn't sure. Could he really be the one to represent Earth and the Nelvari Confederation? Could he live up to the expectations of both worlds? His mind was a swirling mess of questions, but deep down, something told him he had no choice but to walk this path. Whether he was ready or not, the world was waiting. "Today's ceremony is important," Roland continued, his voice becoming more serious. "It's a public acknowledgement of your role as the special envoy, not just for the Nelvari but for Earth as well. You're not just representing yourself anymore, Tyler. You're representing a future where our species can stand together." Tyler's chest tightened at the words. He hadn't been able to fully comprehend the weight of his new role until now. He wasn't just part of something larger than himself. He was helping to create something that could change the course of history. "I don't even know how to begin," Tyler admitted quietly, running a hand through his hair. "I've never been good with speeches, or with being the center of attention." Roland smiled, his expression softening. "You don't need to speak like a diplomat, Tyler. You just need to speak from the heart. That's what matters." As Roland stepped back, giving Tyler space to gather himself, a new realization hit him. This wasn't about him anymore. It wasn't about the janitor who had been rejected from military service, or the man who had fought without a second thought for a child he barely knew. No, it was about a shared future, a promise of peace and cooperation that stretched far beyond the limits of what he had once believed possible. "Come," Roland said, his voice grounding him back in the moment. "The ceremony is about to begin." Tyler followed Roland down the corridors of the Nelvari Palace, the weight of the decision pressing on him with every step. The grandeur of the palace was overwhelming, with walls adorned in intricate carvings and glowing patterns that seemed to come alive in the soft light. As they neared the grand hall, the sounds of distant voices reached his ears, voices from multiple species, from Earth and beyond, all gathered to witness something unprecedented. The doors to the hall opened with a soft hiss, and Tyler was greeted by the sight of dignitaries from all over the galaxy, Nelvari ambassadors, Earth diplomats, and members of the royal family. The room was filled with a hum of conversations, but as soon as Tyler stepped inside, all eyes turned toward him. It was impossible not to feel the weight of their gazes, but Tyler didn't flinch. He couldn't afford to. The moment was bigger than his nerves, bigger than his fear. At the front of the room, King Ellerin stood, flanked by the Lord Regent and other members of the Nelvari court. His regal presence filled the space, and when he looked at Tyler, there was no judgment in his eyes, only something deeper. Respect, trust, a quiet acknowledgement of the role Tyler had already played in their shared history. "Tyler Grant," the king's voice rang out, deep and resonant, "you have shown us what it means to stand between danger and innocence. You have done what many could not do, and in doing so, you have proven yourself as one of us." Tyler felt his heart race, but he held his ground. He was no diplomat, no soldier, but right now in this room he was something far greater. He was a symbol of hope. The king continued, "Today, we formally welcome you not just as a representative of Earth, but as a bridge between our worlds, as a protector of the future." With those words, King Ellerin stepped forward, placing a medallion around Tyler's neck. It was a symbol of the Nelvari Confederation, a circle of unity, intertwined with a shining star at its core. It was heavy, but Tyler didn't flinch. Instead, he held his head high, the weight of the medallion grounding him in the moment. This was his new reality. This was his new purpose. The hall erupted into applause, the sound echoing through the grand chamber, but Tyler barely heard it. His mind was still reeling. He had done it. He had made it here to this point in history, not by accident but because of the choices he had made when it mattered most. Later, as the ceremony continued and the crowd began to disperse, Tyler found himself standing with Mira and her family, surrounded by diplomats and dignitaries. The weight of the medallion on his chest was a constant reminder of the responsibility now resting on his shoulders. "You did it," Mira said, her voice full of admiration. The child, once the reason for his entire journey, now stood beside him as if they were equals, her amber eyes bright with pride. Tyler smiled at her, feeling the depth of the connection they shared. "We did it," he corrected gently. "This is just the beginning." Mira grinned, clearly pleased with his words. "So what's next?" Tyler glanced around the room, his heart swelling with something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. "What's next," he said, turning to meet Roland's gaze, "is a future we're all going to build together." And with that, the world felt just a little bit smaller. Tyler Grant, the janitor who had once thought he was invisible, was now standing in the middle of a new era. One step at a time, he would help guide humanity and the Nelvari into a future that he had never imagined, one where courage, not titles, defined a hero. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be challenges, obstacles, and moments when Tyler doubted himself. But for the first time, he felt certain of one thing: he was exactly where he needed to be. The world was waiting. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon for more amazing videos.